Hello and welcome. Tonight we're not building a pyramid, not hauling limestone or chiseling hieroglyphs. We won't be carving statues, inspecting sarcophagi, or worrying about whether our afterlife passport is in order. No, tonight we'll simply lean quietly against the warm, ancient stone of history. Let the golden dust settle. Let the Nile roll past slowly, and let your thoughts drift back to a place that's often misunderstood. A place of kings and cats, of rituals and sunburns. A place that gave us mysteries and muscle cramps. Before we start, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Your support truly means a lot to me. Also, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. I'm genuinely interested in knowing who is joining us from around the world. Welcome to ancient Egypt, but not the golden, glamorous version. Not the tourist postcard of endless pyramids and immortal pharaohs. Tonight, we're visiting the Egypt of everyday life, the one with sore backs, cracked feet, and flies that never left you alone. We're not pharaohs or priests, not generals, gods, or grand architects. We're just people, ordinary laborers, bakers, boatmen, scribes, and maybe that guy who makes sandals out of palm fibers. You know, regular folk with regular aches, and for once, history will sit still long enough for us to listen in. This is the Egypt where most people didn't speak in proverbs or wear gold collars. They wore sweat-soaked linen and hoped the granaries wouldn't run out before the next flood. This was the Egypt where the Nile wasn't a poetic metaphor. It was the only reason anyone had water. Where work didn't stop just because the sun tried to melt your spine. And where the gods might protect you, but also might curse your crops if you forgot their birthday. Let's set the scene. The year? Let's say around 1350 BCE in the New Kingdom. But don't worry about dates, time moves differently here. We're in a small workers' village not far from a grand construction site. Something pyramid adjacent. Maybe a tomb. Definitely something heavy and full of sand. The Nile is close enough to smell the river breeze, but far enough that carrying water back is still annoying. Your home is made of mud brick, sun-baked and slightly lopsided. The door doesn't shut right, but it stands. And that's good enough. The streets are dusty and winding, full of chickens, children, gossip, and the occasional runaway goat. Neighbors greet each other with nods and murmurs. No one speaks too loudly in the morning, not out of politeness, but out of exhaustion. You can hear the rhythmic tap of a hammer somewhere. Someone's already fixing a roof. A baby cries. Someone sneezes. Sand shifts under sandals. Up on a hill, half-finished stone structures jut out of the ground, like the spines of sleeping giants. That's where you're going later. Not because you want to, but because you must. Pharaoh needs a tomb, and you need wages, or rations, or, at the very least, the ability to not be whipped for skipping your shift. It's warm already. It's always warm. Even in winter, Egypt has a way of wrapping itself around you like a slightly too tight blanket. The sun is creeping over the edge of the horizon, turning the sky from soft violet to gold. You feel it before you see it. The warmth blooming over the land, pulling shadows slowly backward. And in the distance, the familiar low sound of the temple gong. Not loud, not shrill, just a soft reminder that another day has begun. Another chance to haul stones, say your prayers, and avoid trouble. You hear sandals slapping against dry earth. Your neighbor, Horemheb, is already awake and halfway through a fig. He gives you a nod, crumbs stuck to his beard. Don't forget your water jar, he mutters, before disappearing around a corner. Good advice. You forgot yesterday and spent an hour pretending not to be thirsty. You duck back into your home. It's small. One room, maybe two. Mud walls, low ceiling, a sleeping mat, a clay jug, a fire pit, and your tools hanging by the door. Your wife, or perhaps your brother, your cousin, your goat, still sleeps in the corner. The details vary, but the sounds are the same. Soft breathing, the crackle of a dying fire, and the distant clatter of someone trying to fix a pot before the day starts. There's bread from yesterday. It's hard now, but not inedible. You break off a piece and chew slowly. It tastes like barley, grit, and effort. No butter, no jam. But it's food, and food is always enough. You splash some water on your face. The basin is dusty. Of course it is. Everything is dusty. Even the water feels slightly sandy. But it wakes you up. Your hands ache slightly from yesterday's work. Your shoulders even more so. You stretch. It doesn't help, but it's the gesture that counts. You wrap yourself in linen, faded, patched, sun-stained. You check your sandals. They're holding up. Barely. You tuck your amulet under your tunic. Maybe it helps, maybe not. But it's better to be safe when the gods are watching. Outside, the sun is higher now. The air is still cool, but it won't last. You shoulder your tool bag, a wooden mallet, a copper chisel, a roll of twine. It's not much, but it's your trade. You glance once more at the village. The old woman across the street waves. Children run past, chasing a half-deflated ball made from reeds. A rooster crows a little too late. Someone starts singing, off-key and cheerfully. And then you begin walking. Toward the site. Toward the task. Toward the mountain of sand and stone that someone decided must be eternal. You are one of thousands, not famous, not rich, but necessary. A thread in the linen of a civilization that has lasted for centuries and will last for more. You won't be remembered. Your name might fade before your children are grown. But for now, you walk forward, under the weight of the sky, toward the bones of a pharaoh who hasn't even died yet. And as you walk, the sounds of the village fade. The sandals, the whispers, the goats' complaints, all fall away. Just wind, sand, and the faintest rhythm of your own breath. Let's stay here for a while, not in the palace, not in the temple, but just here, among the quiet builders, the dusty streets, the cracked pots, and the sun-warmed stone. We'll wake up slowly, we'll move carefully, and we'll discover that ancient Egypt, for all its grandeur, was mostly just people, waking up, going to work, eating bread, and wondering if the gods were listening. And so we begin. The sun is not yet up, but the world around you is already stirring. You hear it before you feel it. A rooster crows somewhere far too confident for this hour. A goat complains in the courtyard, offended by something existential. The neighbor's child sneezes, and the family next door, or perhaps just a very vocal frog, knocks over a pot. Welcome to your morning in ancient Egypt. You open your eyes, but you don't sit up yet. There's a certain weight to the air, as if even the dust knows it has work to do, the faint breeze coming through the window. If you can call a papyrus-covered hole in the wall a window, carries with it the warm scent of sand, ash, and leftover onions. The house is already warm. It hasn't even gotten started. You lie on your mat, which is technically bedding, woven reeds, a thin cloth thrown on top, and a generous helping of lumps. Your back is sore. It's always sore. You roll slowly, careful not to wake the person sleeping next to you. It might be your spouse, your sibling, your cousin. Homes are shared here. Walls are optional. Privacy is a myth, and so is sleeping in. You hear someone stirring near the hearth, the center of the room and of the household. It's a simple fire pit made of clay, surrounded by old cooking tools and a cracked pot or two. Someone adds straw to it and begins coaxing the coals back to life. A faint glow fills the space. It dances across mud brick walls painted in faded whitewash, where a small household god, maybe Bess, maybe Towerette, smiles protectively with chipped paint. The floor is earthen, stamped flat and hard over generations of footsteps. You can feel it under your fingers as you stretch, cold in places where the morning air touched it, warm in others from the heat of the bodies still sleeping nearby. You hear the slow clatter of clay mugs, the dull thunk of bread crust on wood. Someone hums a song you've heard since you were little, something about grain or rain, or maybe just a tune to chase away the quiet. Time to get up. You sit slowly, carefully, and stretch again. A papyrus curtain hangs across the doorway, more for dust than for privacy. You pull it aside and step outside into a narrow street just wide enough for 2 goats and a child carrying too many jugs. Your home is part of a cluster, one of many low, flat-roofed structures made of mud brick. They rise up in uneven stacks, with stairs that lead to rooftops where laundry flaps in the dry breeze and old men complain about the cost of fish. Your neighbor waves. She's already kneading dough. She hasn't slept since the moon was high. She doesn't need to say good morning. Her eyes do it for her. You step back inside. Breakfast waits on a clay plate, a rough round of flatbread, slightly burned on one side. Maybe a few dates if yesterday was generous. and a small mug of thick, warm liquid that qualifies as beer, though it tastes more like liquid bread. You chew and sip at the same time. Everything in Egypt involves multitasking. Interesting fact, beer was a staple of the Egyptian diet. It wasn't just a drink, it was nutrition, hydration, and a small distraction from the heat and monotony. Brewed from emmer wheat and barley, it was thick, often chunky, and closer to porridge than to anything found in a modern pint glass. But it filled the stomach and dulled the edge of early mornings. The bread is dry, but it's filling. Made of barley and baked over hot stones, it always tastes a little like sand. Because there's always sand. In the flour, in the mugs, in your clothes. You try not to crunch down too hard. Sand wears down teeth, and dentists haven't been invented yet. Not the kind you'd want, anyway. You glance around the room. Tools hang on the walls, not for decoration, but because there's nowhere else to put them. A wooden hoe, a grinding stone, a simple woven basket. The kind of objects that historians admire in museums. But here, they just mean another long day ahead. The family begins to move now. Children argue about who gets the clean tunic. A cousin borrows your water jug again. A chicken escapes from somewhere it wasn't supposed to be and is quietly herded back into the corner by your spouse, who mutters something under their breath about putting a lid on everything. You smile, or at least smirk. There's a brief moment of peace before you go. You stand in the doorway, watching the sun finally rise. It lifts itself over the flat rooftops, turning the mud brick walls a soft golden hue. A breeze moves through the alley, tugging at linen tunics and rattling palm fronds. Somewhere, a temple gong sounds in the distance. The day is beginning whether you're ready or not. You gather your gear, a stone mallet, a copper chisel, a water jug wrapped in damp linen to keep it cool. Your sandals, worn thin and tied with fraying reeds, still manage to stay on your feet. You wear a simple white tunic, faded by years of sun and work. Around your neck hangs a small charm, an amulet for protection, carved from bone or shell. It's nothing fancy, but it matters. Outside, others begin to gather. Fellow workers, neighbors, friends you've known since you were small. Some are stretching, some are already complaining. One of them has a bruise the size of a melon from yesterday's cart mishap. Another carries a basket of figs as a bribe for the foreman. Standard morning politics. The foreman arrives soon after. He's older, tired, carrying a list he can't read, but someone told him what it says. He barks names, points fingers, gives orders. You nod. You understand. You've done this before. The work site is half an hour away. Uphill, through sand, past a line of tamarisk trees and a stubborn pile of broken pottery no one's bothered to clean up. You take your place in line. No one marches. This isn't the army, but the rhythm is the same. Sandals, chatter, creaking carts. And somewhere in the distance, the shape of the pyramid rises above the horizon, like a judgment. You walk. The sun climbs higher. The Nile glitters beyond the palm trees, a promise of water and work. You are quiet. The others are too. Morning is for waking. Talking comes later. As you walk, you pass graffiti scratched into rock, a cartoon of a cat chasing a goose, a name, half faded, a tally of days worked. Ancient Egypt was full of writing, not just on scrolls and tombs, but everywhere. Little marks of life, of presence, of boredom. You are one of many, not rich, not remembered, but real. Your hands are calloused, your feet know this path, and your heart beats with the same rhythm that built temples, raised obelisks, and whispered prayers to the rising sun. The pyramid waits, the tools are ready, the foreman is watching, and the gods, well, they're always watching. But for now, just walk. Let the sun rise. Let the dust swirl. Let the day unfold, as it always does, with effort, with heat, and with the quiet pride of another day lived in the cradle of civilization. You arrive at the worksite just as the sun climbs over the limestone ridge, turning the surrounding hills from cool beige to blinding white. You squint against the glare. Everyone does. There are no sunglasses in ancient Egypt, just eyelids and suffering. Your crew is already forming up. You're late, or rather, you're not early, which in this particular job amounts to the same thing. The overseer is scanning the group with his arms crossed, lips tight, eyes like chipped obsidian. You nod at him respectfully and take your place among your team. He doesn't nod back. Welcome to your shift as a member of the Corvée labor force. State-mandated, community-organized work, typically unpaid. Not slavery, not quite a job, but something in between. You're here because your village was told to send people, and your number came up. Maybe it was random. Maybe you annoyed someone. Maybe you just look good on a ramp. You're not alone. Dozens, sometimes hundreds, are gathered here. Some are locals. Others were sent from villages far down the Nile. All have been pressed into service to help build a monument that isn't for you, or your family, or anyone you'll likely meet. You're building for the afterlife of someone else. And that someone wears gold. You hear the chant before you see the block. A slow, steady rhythm. Voices rising in call and response. The sound of something ancient and practical. Then it appears. A stone block the size of a small boat, dragging its way across log rollers, pushed and pulled by a crew of 20. Ropes dig into their hands. Muscles strain under linen tunics soaked through before mid-morning. Dust rises in lazy clouds. A supervisor walks alongside them, barking corrections that sound more like poetry than punishment. You get into position. Your job today is to help shift blocks from the quarry to the foundation site. No carts, no animals, just ropes, rollers, leverage, and a deeply personal relationship with your spine. The block is already on wooden logs, placed carefully like rails. Your team uses poles and brute force to nudge it forward. When a roller pops out from under the rear, someone grabs it, runs ahead, and places it in front again. And again, and again. You do this for hours. No one talks much, except for the team leader, whose job is to shout. Encouragement, mostly. Sometimes it's a chant, sometimes a joke. Sometimes it's just yelling for the sake of momentum. His voice gets hoarser as the day goes on, but he never stops. If he does, the rhythm dies, and with it the block, stuck in the sand, unmoving, waiting for your collective motivation to return. You slip once, just a little. The rope jerks, your fingers burn, but you keep going. Interesting fact, ancient Egyptian labor crews were often organized into teams with nicknames. Not official designations, just titles passed along the chain of workers. Some have been found scratched into quarry walls or painted in tombs. There were groups called things like the Friends of Khufu or the Vigorous Ones of the West. One team was proudly known as the Drunkards of Menkaura. No one is quite sure whether that was earned or aspirational. You suspect your team is more like the Sore-backed Sons of the South. You've never actually asked. Asking would require talking. Talking would require breath. You're saving that. The overseer walks by. He carries a stick. He rarely uses it. The threat is enough. He has a little tablet, not the digital kind, and a piece of charcoal. He marks something down. Probably how slow you're moving, or how uneven the rollers are. Or maybe he's just drawing pictures. You'll never know. No one complains out loud. Complaints don't get you anywhere. The work has to be done. The sun doesn't wait. The pharaoh doesn't either. You take a moment, while repositioning a roller, to notice the pyramid's skeleton ahead. Stone steps rising into the sky, half completed, swarming with dots that are other workers. From far away, it almost looks peaceful. Up close, it's chaos. Shouting, clanging, hammering. Everywhere, the sounds of effort, coordination, and sand. Always sand. You are building history, though no one here would say it like that. You're moving blocks. You're sweating into the soil. You're trying not to get stepped on. But someday, someone will look at this and wonder how it was done. The answer will be by people like you, with hands like yours, who probably also wished they had a job that involved more sitting and less lifting. You finally reach the ramp, a long, sloping path built out of rubble and compacted earth, spiraling up the face of the structure like a determined snail. Your block begins its slow crawl upward. You're rotated out now, your team given a short break, not out of kindness, but because muscle fatigue becomes counterproductive. You step to the side and drink from a leather flask. The water is warm and slightly brackish, but it's better than nothing. You wipe your face with your sleeve. Bad idea. Now your sleeve is dusty and so is your face. Someone next to you makes a joke. Something about the block being lighter than his mother-in-law. You try to laugh, but only manage a grunt. You're too tired to be amused. Still, it's nice to hear something other than grunting and orders. Someone else points to a falcon overhead. A real one, not the god Horus. It rides the warm thermals with lazy grace. You envy its ability to float above all this. But falcons don't build tombs. They just watch. You hear singing again. Another team, another chant. The beat changes as the angle shifts. Harder to move uphill. More coordination, more shouting. Someone slips. A block jerks forward. Everything stops. Then it starts again. No one is crushed today. That's a win. You return to your task. There's more to do. Always more. The sun is high now. Your tunic sticks to your skin. Your arms are sore. Your calves are sending you messages that could only be translated by someone fluent in pain. But you move forward, because forward is the only direction you're allowed to go. Somewhere, a priest blesses a foundation. Somewhere else, an architect draws lines in the dirt with a stick and dreams of precision. You don't see them. You don't need to. They're not the ones bleeding on the limestone. You haul, you breathe, you keep your eyes down and your grip steady. This block will move. Eventually, it always does. And when it does, when it finally lurches into position, and the rope is dropped, and the logs are gathered, and the block rests on its new home, you get a moment, just one, to breathe, to exist, to let your arms fall to your sides and feel the weight shift from muscle to memory. And then you do it again, because there's another block waiting, and you're on the list. The sun is high now, like a bored overseer itself, glaring down from above with no intention of moving until it's good and ready. Everything is bleached. The sky, the sand, your tunic, your mood. Heat rises off stone in visible waves. Even the goats, who are usually unbothered by life in general, have retreated into shade with expressions that suggest existential fatigue. But you're lucky. For a moment at least. Your team has been granted a midday break. It's not long. Nothing is long in a workday except the work itself. But it's something. A thin strip of shade, cast by a half-built wall, becomes a congregation zone. Men squat or sit or lean, each assuming whatever position most quickly reduces the risk of collapsing altogether. Your feet hurt. Your back feels like it's writing angry letters to your legs. But now comes the one consolation the midday offers. Food. Or, to be more accurate, fuel. Lunch in ancient Egypt, especially for laborers, is simple. It is designed to be simple. It is the edible version of just keep going. First comes the bread. It's flat, often hard, and baked quickly in open clay ovens. The crust is dark, the inside pale and dense. There's no such thing as soft and fluffy, not at your level of the social pyramid. What you get is filling and portable. You break it in half with your hands, because that's how you eat. There are no forks. There are spoons sometimes, but not here, and certainly not during lunch break. Fingers are the tools of choice. Sometimes the bread still holds a hint of ash from the fire. Other times it comes pre-seasoned with sand. A common problem considering everything is covered in sand, including your hands, including your teeth eventually. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because you're trying to avoid losing a molar. Then there are onions, always onions, raw and sharp. They clear your nose, sting your eyes, and give your mouth something to argue with. They're not subtle. Garlic too, if someone brought some. It's strong and earthy and excellent at ensuring no one will want to stand too close to you after the break. Which honestly is fine. If you're lucky, and you were this morning, someone brought dried fish. It's chewy, salty, and somewhat of a mystery. You eat it anyway. It keeps well and doesn't require a lot of fuss. You could ask what kind of fish it is, but the answer won't change anything, and you'll still be chewing it an hour from now. But the real star of the meal is beer. Yes, beer, but not the golden, bubbly kind that shows up in commercials during sports events. Egyptian beer is different. It's warm, it's thick, it's brownish, it's sometimes chunky. In fact, it's closer to a porridge than a drink. You don't sip it, you slurp it. Some people chew it. This is not a luxury. This is sustenance. Beer in ancient Egypt is made from fermented barley bread and dates, strained poorly or not at all, and poured into simple clay jars. It's filling, mildly alcoholic, and full of nutrients, which is good because no one is giving you vitamins. Interesting fact, beer was so central to Egyptian life that it was often used as part of worker wages. Pharaohs built pyramids, yes, but not without keeping the workforce mildly buzzed and moderately full. Beer was currency, beer was medicine, beer was motivation. You take a few gulps, it's warm, it tastes faintly sour. There are bits in it. You pretend not to notice. A bee flies dangerously close to your cup. You swat it away with the practiced motion of someone who has done this every day for months. Conversation during the lunch break is minimal. It's too hot. Words require energy. Most people eat with slow, rhythmic movements, eyes half-lidded against the glare. One man hums a song, off-key but familiar. Another picks a rock from his sandal and sighs dramatically. No one laughs, but someone nods in agreement. You lean against the wall and feel the warmth of the stone press into your back. It's not comforting, but it's solid. Which is more than you can say for the bench you used to have back home that collapsed after one too many goat-related accidents. Someone offers you a second piece of bread. You decline. Your jaw is still recovering from the first. You stare out past the half-built tomb toward the flat desert. The Nile is nearby, but not near enough. A smear of green in the distance reminds you that, technically, this country is fertile. Just not right here. Flies buzz lazily. A dog ambles past the workers, tail low, eyes scanning for dropped food. It is ignored, and it ignores in return. You scratch your arm and discover a new sunburn. Excellent. That brings the count to 5. A supervisor walks by, reminding everyone, without speaking, that the break won't last forever. No one moves, but everyone hears it. The implication, the countdown. You take one last swallow of beer. The last gulp is the worst. All the sediment sinks to the bottom. You power through it. Because what else are you going to do? The fishbone catches briefly in your teeth. You pick it out with your fingernail. Success. Someone nearby burps. It's not impolite. It's expected. You pat the dust from your tunic, futilely, as more dust is waiting underneath it, and stretch. Your knees crack. Your elbows make that noise they only started making after your 3rd month on the job. You look over to the line of men already starting to stand. The block hauling will resume in minutes. The sun shows no sign of mercy. The air shimmers. The shade is slipping. You wipe your hands on your linen. You adjust your sandals. You brace yourself. Another day, another shift, another 100 pounds of limestone. But for a few minutes, you were fed. You were hydrated, and you got to sit down. In ancient Egypt, that's about as good as it gets. The sun is no longer something in the sky. It's something pressing down on you, personally, like an angry god or an overbearing aunt. It's in your eyes. It's in your tunic. It is somehow beneath your skin. There are no shadows anymore. Even the walls radiate heat. And the work is still here, still heavy. Still uninterested in how your feet feel. You're back on the job site, surrounded by limestone blocks that feel like they multiply when you're not looking. Your job is still the same. Hauling, pulling, adjusting, hauling again. The logs that help slide the blocks across the sand are now hot enough to fry an egg, if anyone had eggs. Or the time. Your tunic, which was once loosely draped and breezy in the morning, is now an adhesive fabric of regret. It clings to every bend of your body, soaked through with a mixture of sweat, dust, and that thick Nile humidity that doesn't so much settle in as it does stake a permanent claim. You adjust the collar. It helps nothing. The sandals, made from woven reeds or leather if you're lucky, have reached peak betrayal. The straps dig into your skin. The soles have picked up a layer of grit and heat. Every step is a negotiation between pain and persistence. And sand. There is always sand. It's not just under your feet. It's in your mouth. It's in your hair. It's made its way past every layer of clothing and into regions of your body that should remain unspoken. It scrapes when you move. It whispers when you breathe. It's not just terrain. It's a co-worker. an annoying one who never takes a break and always gets in your lunch. The team is quieter now. Morning energy has evaporated with the last breath of shade. Communication comes in grunts, gestures, and the occasional shouted warning as a log slips or a block shifts. The block always shifts the wrong way. There is never a good direction for a several-ton rock to move unexpectedly. You glance at the overseers. They walk the perimeter like buzzards in linen skirts, holding long sticks. They don't do the work. They just make sure you do. And if motivation wanes, as it tends to when your spine is screaming and your fingers have gone numb, the stick makes its case. Interesting fact, some of these overseers were not as respected as they liked to think. Graffiti discovered in hidden corners of workers' tombs includes surprisingly well-preserved insults. There are drawings of supervisors depicted as monkeys or sporting exaggerated body parts, along with commentary in crude hieroglyphs that essentially boil down to ancient workplace venting. Thousands of years later, and people are still doodling angry cartoons about their bosses. But here, in the heat, you're not drawing, you're just sweating. The block you're pushing doesn't care about your feelings. It needs to be aligned perfectly so that someone a few centuries from now can walk around the base of a monument and marvel at how ingenious the labor system was. Ingenious is not the word you'd use. Backbreaking is more accurate, possibly criminal, but no one's asking you. The stone groans as it shifts. Someone yells. You lean your weight into it, back tight, feet sliding in the sand. The sun watches, unmoved. You pause to wipe your face. It doesn't help. The sweat is replaced instantly. Your hands are coated in dust, which turns to mud on your skin. Your eyes sting. You blink. The pyramid doesn't care. Neither does the foreman. Occasionally, someone passes with a water skin, warm water, tasting vaguely of leather and Nile silt. You sip and immediately sweat it out. But it's enough to keep your legs from giving up. Barely. Time drips slower than the water. You glance at the sky. No relief there. The sun still owns it. At a nearby station, someone shouts about measurements. The ancient Egyptians, bless them, were exact. Blocks must be placed precisely. Levels must be checked with plumb lines and tools made of string and ingenuity. You try to focus, but your vision dances in the heat. Everything shimmers. Even the pyramid, a symbol of eternal strength, wavers like a mirage. The work continues. It always does. You haul rope, your palms burning. The fibers cut into your hands, already cracked from days of dust and labor. You wrap a scrap of cloth around one wrist, hoping it helps. It doesn't. There's a boy nearby, probably 10 or 12, running errands. He carries a message or a tool, or just runs because someone shouted. He doesn't look tired. You do not like him. Someone drops a block chisel. It clangs, startling everyone. For a second, everything stops. Then the yelling begins, and the rhythm resumes. You lift, you pull, you adjust, you breathe shallow. And finally, after what feels like days, but is probably only a couple of hours, the signal comes. Work pause, tools down, rub your neck, stretch your back, carefully. Try to find the spot where your spine used to be. The sun has moved, slightly. It's now directly behind your eyes, which is somehow worse. You trudge back to the staging area, sweat tracking down your arms, your legs, your face. Your tunic now has streaks of salt, and your skin is itching in places you can't reach. Someone offers you more beer. You decline. You don't want to chew your beverage again just yet. You collapse onto a stone. It's hot. Everything is hot. You stare at your hands. They're rough, swollen, stained with limestone dust. You have blisters in places you didn't know could blister. There's some idle conversation nearby. One man bets the pyramid will be done before the next flood. Another says not unless the overseer finally trips over that rope he keeps ignoring. The conversation fades into background noise, like the wind, like the rustle of reeds near the river, like your own breathing trying to catch up with itself. You close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, just to not see brightness. Your body feels heavy and hollow at the same time. Soon it will be time to walk back, but for now, just a moment. A moment without lifting, without yelling, without the sun pointing at you like a giant fiery finger. The work whistle doesn't exist. There's no bell or siren or official "day is done" announcement. But you know, everyone knows. A grunt here, a shrug there, a quiet loosening of the shoulders. A moment when the rope gets dropped instead of pulled. That moment means it's over, at least the official part of the day. Because the part where your body stops hurting, that doesn't come for a while. Your arms are noodles. Your back is one long complaint. Your feet? You're not sure they even qualify as feet anymore. They feel like two heavy blocks attached to the end of your legs by regret and string. There's no ride, no donkey, no wagon waiting to carry you home. Just your sandals, barely holding together, and a long, familiar path through the sand. The first few steps are the worst. Muscles scream, joints snap like reeds. But you fall into the rhythm of walking, partly because there's no other option. Around you, other workers walk too. Some groan, some mutter, some just stare at the ground, thinking about nothing in particular, or perhaps everything at once. No one really talks on the way home. You've all had enough shouting for one day. Enough orders, enough lifting, enough adjusting blocks by half a palm's width. This part of the day is quiet, not peaceful exactly, just tired. The path hugs the river, eventually. The Nile, dark and wide in the fading sun, moves gently alongside you. Sometimes it sparkles. Right now, it mostly smells like damp things and life. Not a bad smell, just present. You see someone crouched near the water, scooping handfuls over his face. Maybe he's washing off the day. Maybe he's trying to remember what cold feels like. You consider doing the same, but your knees vote no. A few steps ahead, a pair of boys race along the edge of the riverbank. Where do they get the energy? Maybe their shift was easier. Maybe they're young enough not to realize tomorrow looks exactly like today. Either way, they kick up dust and joy behind them, and it makes you smile. A little. You pass cattle headed in the other direction. Big plodding animals with long faces and slow tails. Their herder waves as you walk by. You grunt politely. That counts as a greeting. Traders shout from the river's edge. Boats, broad, flat-bottomed ones, drift past, full of pottery, baskets, or sacks of something vaguely agricultural. The smell is fine. You try not to breathe too deeply. Interesting fact, the Nile isn't just a water source. It's a highway, a bathtub, a pantry, and a trash chute. It gives water for crops, a route for trade, a place to do laundry, and a spot to bathe your underarms, usually all at the same time. Boats glide silently along it during the day, pulled by sails and poles, and the current helps return them by night. Some call it the lifeblood of Egypt. Today, it feels more like a sigh. You stop at a familiar bend, the spot where the water runs shallow and smooth. You drop to your knees and splash a little onto your arms. The cold surprises you. Your skin, so used to the dry heat, flinches. Then it welcomes it. You soak your tunic, rinse your hands, wipe your neck. It helps. A little. Others do the same. A row of aching bodies along the riverbank, all performing the same ritual. Not because anyone said to, but because this is just what you do. Cool off. Breathe. Pretend the soreness in your shoulders is temporary. One man carefully peels off his sandals and wades ankle deep. Brave soul. The mud squishes between his toes. You make a mental note to do the same. One day, when your feet stop throbbing, along the road, reeds rustle in the breeze. Papyrus plants sway, green and whispery. Birds squawk as they settle in for the evening. The light has shifted. Gold now, soft and sideways. Long shadows stretch across the sand like sleepy arms. The pyramid, distant but still visible, is framed in that glow. You squint at it, still there, still enormous, still your workplace. Back on your feet, time to finish the walk. The path rises a bit and the wind picks up. Gentle, warm, full of dust and the scent of evening fires. Somewhere nearby, someone is already cooking. You smell smoke, maybe lentils, maybe onions. Your stomach wakes up. The homes come into view. Low, brown structures made of mud brick. Modest, close together, almost blending into the earth itself. That's the idea. Keep the heat out during the day, the warmth in during the night. The houses are small but functional. One room, maybe two, a small courtyard, a roof for sleeping in the summer if you're lucky. You reach your doorway. It's familiar, worn smooth by elbows and time. Inside, it's dim. Someone, your wife, your brother, your neighbor's kid who just wanders in sometimes, nods as you enter. You don't speak yet. You're still unpeeling yourself from the day. You set down your work belt, your tools. You rub your hands together and watch the dust fall. You stretch your back. It makes a noise. You pretend it didn't. A clay jug of water waits for you. Not cold, but not hot. You drink deeply. Some dribbles down your chin, and you don't even care. You sit on a woven mat, lean against a wall. It's not comfortable, but it doesn't need to be. It's home, or close enough. Outside, the voices of neighbors echo. Children laugh. Chickens squawk. Somewhere, a reed flute plays a tired tune. The Nile flows in the background, steady and silent. And tomorrow will look almost exactly the same. But that's not tonight's concern. Tonight is for letting your muscles settle, your breath even out, your eyes close slowly as the last light fades from the sky. You make it through the door just in time for the evening chaos. Home isn't quiet. It never is. It's a space filled with people, noise, heat, and overlapping chores. The smell of cooking hangs thick in the air. Lentils bubbling, onions sizzling in oil, and the faint tang of smoke from a fire that doesn't want to cooperate. Someone coughs. Someone laughs. Someone drops a clay pot and curses. It's a modest home. Mud brick walls smoothed with plaster. A few wooden shelves, and reed mats stacked in one corner for sleeping. You'd call it cozy if there weren't so many elbows. Your feet barely cross the threshold before a child runs into you. They're barefoot, covered in dust, and absolutely shouting. You're not sure what about. Something involving a goat, probably. There's always a goat. You take your place near the hearth, where the evening meal simmers in a ceramic pot. Your spouse, already juggling dinner and discipline, gives you a tired look. Not angry, not joyful, just the universal expression of someone who's been doing 4 jobs since sunrise. You nod. It's enough. The children are loud, full of the kind of energy that somehow survives heat and hunger. They argue over whose turn it is to fan the fire. One of them tries to sneak a handful of bread. Another is attempting to tie a reed rope around the family cat. The cat is not impressed. You sit. Not because it's time to relax, but because if you don't, your legs might collapse. The mat beneath you is frayed and lumpy, but it beats standing. Your back pops as you lean against the wall. The familiar roughness of the plaster presses into your shoulder blades. It's oddly reassuring. Someone offers you water. Warm, slightly metallic, but welcome. Dinner arrives in clay bowls. Thick lentil stew, rough flatbread, maybe a boiled vegetable if fortune smiled at the market today. The stew is hot, the bread is dry, and you eat every bite with your fingers as usual. Interesting fact. Ancient Egyptian meals didn't use utensils. Hands did the work. Bread often served as scoop, spoon, and napkin all in one. Table manners were more practical than polished, and no one expected conversation while chewing. The fire crackles nearby, filling the room with flickering light and mild smoke. The chimney, if you're lucky enough to have one, is more whole than structure. The smoke mostly escapes. Mostly, goats outside bleat with the unmistakable tone of animals who believe they deserve more attention. One tries to push its head through the curtain hanging over the doorway. Someone throws a sandal. The goat retreats, unimpressed. Neighbors murmur through the thin walls. The next room over has a baby crying. Across the narrow alley outside, a woman sings an old song as she stirs a pot. You don't recognize the tune, but the rhythm is familiar. Slow, steady, a lullaby for anyone within earshot. Your children settle, eventually. One nods off in your lap. Another lies with their head in their sibling's elbow. Not quite comfortable, but close enough. The reed mats are unrolled. The day is winding down. Interesting fact. Egyptian homes were often multi-roomed, especially in urban areas, but windows were rare. Small openings near the roof let in light and released smoke, but kept out sand, pests, and excessive heat. Most homes had a central living space, a sleeping area, and a small roof terrace, used for cooling off on hot nights or drying laundry by day. The darkness outside deepens. Inside, the fire's glow dances across the walls. It makes the plaster ripple like water, throws shadows that move when no one else does. The insects begin their nightly chorus, chirps, buzzes, and the occasional crunch underfoot. You scratch an itch on your ankle, only to realize it's another bite. You sigh. No mosquito nets, no ointments, just endurance and the hope the little beasts prefer someone else tonight. Conversation trickles in, slow, fragmented, mostly complaints. The pot cracked again. Too much salt this time. The baker's son was caught stealing dates. My cousin swears he saw a crocodile at the ferry dock. Everyone murmurs. No one really answers. It's not about solutions. It's about exhaling the day in shared harmless gripes. You stare into the flames. You don't think about work tomorrow, or at least you try not to. The stone blocks, the dust, the shouting. They'll be there whether you worry or not. For now, this moment is enough. Food in your belly, children asleep, and a roof, mostly, over your head. Your spouse joins you, sitting close. No words, just proximity. After a day spent among so many people shouting orders and pushing stones, a quiet shoulder feels like magic. Someone yawns. Another lies back and begins to snore. The cat, no longer a hostage, curls beside the fire. The goat resumes its head-butting campaign against the wall, but with less energy now. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. Firewood snapping, a soft cough, the Nile's distant whisper, the rustle of palm fronds outside. Soon the mats will fill, the oil lamp will be snuffed, the room will grow darker, stuffier, softer, but not just yet. Tonight you rest among your people, loud, loving, slightly smelly, in a house that's not fancy, not famous, but full of life. Evening in your ancient Egyptian home doesn't end with dinner. After the food is scraped from the bowls and the fire dies down to a whispering glow, it's time to perform one final ritual. Not for the gods, but for yourself. Cleanliness in Egypt isn't just about vanity, it's survival, and maybe a little bit about impressing your neighbors. First comes water, not a tub, not even a bucket bath, just a basin, some carefully poured water, and a smooth stone floor that hopes you don't spill too much. You strip down to your linen wrap or go completely bare, depending on how many people are sharing the room and how much you care anymore. You splash. Not a lot. Water is precious, but enough to chase the sweat from your arms, the dust from your neck, and the lingering smells from a day spent among men, goats, and hot bread. It's not exactly luxurious, but in this moment, it's enough. Then the oil. Always the oil. No soap here, at least not in the way you know it. Egyptians clean themselves by rubbing oil over their skin, then scraping it away with a curved tool called a strigil. The oil loosens dirt, sweat, and flakes of sunburnt skin. The scraping doesn't hurt much, but it does leave you shining, smooth, and slightly fragrant, like someone who wrestled a pot of sesame paste and sort of won. Interesting fact. Egyptians often used perfumed oils for both hygiene and skincare. The hot, dry air made skin crack and peel without protection, so oil served as moisturizer, cleanser, and sometimes even deodorant. Your neighbor prefers cedar oil. Another swears by castor. You tonight settle for whatever was cheapest at market. You rub it onto your arms, your chest, your cracked heels. The scent rises like a whisper, earthy, warm, vaguely nutty. Next comes hair, or the lack of it. Head shaving is a surprisingly common habit here, not just for the priests and the upper class. Lice don't care about social status, and the best way to keep them away is to give them nothing to cling to. So out comes the razor, a curved copper blade, sharp enough if you know what you're doing, terrifying if you don't. You kneel near the fire's glow, balancing a small copper mirror in your lap. You run the blade slowly, carefully across your scalp. The sound is soft, not quite a scrape, not quite a whisper, more like the sound of peeling an apple in a very quiet room. Some people shave their entire bodies, others leave a thin line of hair or a tuft in the back. It depends on your region, your job, and how vain you're feeling that week. If you cut yourself, and let's face it, you probably did, you dab the wound with honey, not just for sweetness. Ancient Egyptians knew that honey had healing properties. It sealed wounds, killed bacteria, and smelled better than mud. If it's a bigger wound, well, that's when you visit the neighborhood healer. And that brings us to medicine. Ancient Egyptian medicine is a strange blend of real science, guesswork, and magical thinking. You'd go to a doctor, who might also be a priest, or a scribe, or your aunt, and describe the problem. A sore tooth, a racing heart, a leg that keeps going numb. You'd receive a diagnosis that includes ingredients like frankincense, ground beetle, and perhaps a dash of goose fat. Maybe a spell, maybe a song, maybe crocodile dung pressed into a paste. Yes, that's a real thing. No, you don't want to ask where they got it. Interesting fact, despite some eyebrow-raising remedies, Egyptian doctors were highly respected in the ancient world. Greek historians like Herodotus wrote about their skill and specialization. Some treated only eyes, others focused on teeth or digestion. They kept detailed papyri full of treatments and symptoms, many of which were remarkably advanced for the time. Still, you prefer to stay healthy. To help with that, you wear an amulet. You've had it since childhood. A small carved scarab on a string, polished by years of thumb rubbing. It's not flashy, not gold, but it feels powerful in your hand. Scarabs symbolize rebirth. You hope it also symbolizes fewer scorpion stings. Your neighbor wears an eye of Horus. Another has a tiny statue of Bes, a dwarf god known for chasing away evil spirits. One woman keeps a frog figurine under her pillow, swearing it prevents nightmares. Magic and medicine go hand in hand here. You might wrap a bandage around your leg while chanting an old healing hymn. You might burn incense not for the smell, but to drive away the invisible demons of disease. If nothing else, it helps you feel like you're doing something. The fire dims. The room grows quieter. The kids have been scrubbed, slightly, fed, barely, and wrangled into something resembling sleep. You lie down on your reed mat. It creaks, but it holds. You place your amulet under the edge of the mat, close enough to reach if the dreams go sour. The air is still warm. Your skin glows faintly from the oil. You smell like sesame, ash, and onion. Not ideal, but familiar. A mosquito buzzes past. You swat. Miss. Swat again. Miss again. You give up and roll over. Sleep doesn't come fast. It rarely does. Your back is sore. Your fingers ache. Your neck still smells faintly of garlic from lunch. But the day is done. You're cleanish. You've survived. Your spouse mumbles something in their sleep. A name, maybe. A half laugh. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will be the same. Sand, sweat, and stone. But tonight, for a few quiet hours, you are wrapped in linen, oil, and the hum of the Nile's breeze outside. And that's enough. Night has finally arrived in your little mud brick home, and technically, so has the promise of rest. The heat has backed off just enough to be survivable. The fire has died down into a sleepy pile of glowing embers, and all the loudest children have either fallen asleep or collapsed mid-argument. You lie on a woven mat that's seen better days, flattened, fraying, and with just the right amount of mysterious scratchiness to keep you from getting too comfortable. Beneath the mat is a hard floor of packed earth or stone, depending on how lucky you are. There's no such thing as a mattress, just reeds, linen, and the distant dream of elevation. You shift once, twice, and then again, adjusting your linen tunic, trying to keep the fabric from sticking in places where it really shouldn't stick. The breeze is minimal, just a faint trickle of Nile air that manages to find its way through the narrow slit of a window. It helps. A little. The sounds of night in an Egyptian village are not silent. They never were. Someone nearby coughs. Someone else giggles in their sleep. A goat bleats like it knows a secret. You hear the rhythmic creaking of wooden shutters that don't quite latch properly, and the distant thud of someone trying to scare birds off their roof. Mosquitoes whine by your ear with surgical focus, drawn to your exposed ankles like they're a buffet line. You swat, miss, sigh, and then roll onto your other side. The linen sheet you're using is more symbolic than useful. It doesn't quite cover you and barely keeps the bugs off, but it's yours, and it's better than nothing. Interesting fact, ancient Egyptians did not have mosquito nets, but they did sometimes sleep outdoors during the hotter months. hoping the night breeze and the open sky would offer a little relief. Of course, this meant trading one problem for another, namely, biting insects and occasional visits from curious animals. As you lie there, swatting and sighing, your mind starts to wander, not just toward dreams, but toward the meaning of them. Because here in ancient Egypt, dreams are not just nonsense stitched together by a sleepy brain. They're messages from the gods, from the dead, from the deeper parts of your soul. If you dream of a crocodile, it might mean danger. If you dream of climbing a palm tree, perhaps you're about to gain favor or fortune. If you dream of being naked in the market, well, that could mean anything from spiritual vulnerability to just being really stressed about your neighbor's gossip. Interesting fact, the Egyptians took dream interpretation seriously. There were trained dream interpreters, sometimes temple priests, who maintained entire dream books. These texts listed common dreams and their meanings, often with extensive commentary. One surviving example, known today as the Ramesside Dream Book, categorizes dreams as good or bad omens and offers interpretations like, if a man sees himself eating crocodile meat, it means he will become a powerful official. Spicy. Of course, you're no priest. You're just hoping you don't dream of more sand. You adjust your amulet, the scarab you keep tucked beneath your pillow. It's supposed to guard you from evil spirits in the night. You mutter a short prayer to Bez, the dwarf god who protects sleepers and scares away demons with his giant tongue and musical instruments. You picture him standing at the foot of your mat, shaking a tambourine at the nightmares. It helps. The room breathes with you. One of the children sighs. The old man in the next room lets out a thunderous snore that could be used to measure earthquakes. And yet, slowly, with effort, you begin to fall into sleep. The process isn't immediate. It never is. There are too many itches, too many thoughts, too many odd creaks in the walls and in your bones. But over time, the woven mat starts to feel like a boat drifting out on a wide, still Nile. Your breath slows, your muscles soften. You dream of markets, of boats, of the smell of garlic and wet stone. You dream of voices you know and ones you don't. Maybe a cat talks to you. Maybe the sky rains frogs. Maybe you're flying, always barefoot, always late for something. The dreams feel strange, but familiar, like messages written in a script you almost understand. When you wake, you might remember parts of them, or nothing at all. You'll decide later whether to share them, to ponder them, or just to blame them on dinner. A mosquito finally gets you on the ankle. You twitch, groan softly, and roll again. There's no such thing as deep sleep here. Not in this heat. Not on this mat. Not with that goat still muttering outside. But you do sleep. In fragments. Like puzzle pieces dropped across the night. Outside, the stars shimmer over the Nile. The river glides in the dark, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere, a priest is reciting prayers for sunrise. Somewhere else, a family is sitting up with a sick child, whispering old spells between mouthfuls of warm beer. But in this little home, with its smoky ceiling and whispering walls, the day is over. The labor, the sweat, the blisters, the breadcrumbs in your tunic, they all dissolve for now. Interesting fact, the average Egyptian laborer likely got 6 to 8 hours of broken sleep, depending on family size, seasonal work, and how many insects decided to throw a party. But sleep was still sacred, not just for the body, but for the soul, which was believed to leave and return to the body during the night. You feel yours returning now, curling back into your chest like a bird folding its wings. The fire glows faintly in the corner, flickering like an old story told too many times. Tomorrow, there will be more stone, more bread, more sand. But tonight, there's this moment, this mat, this breath, this fragile peace in the land of gods and grinding labor. The day starts loud. Trumpets, or something like trumpets, blare in the distance before you've had your bread, or your beer, or even a full blink. You roll over on your mat, groggy and sore, hoping it's just the neighbor yelling again. But no, today is a festival day. Again. In ancient Egypt, that means everything stops, and somehow, everything also starts. Religious festivals are frequent, loud, and mandatory. Yes, mandatory, because while celebration might sound like a break, in Egypt even joy is scheduled, supervised, and sweating under the sun. You sit up. Someone is already clapping. Somewhere outside, a drum thumps steadily like a heartbeat. The gods are on the move. There are over 70 major festivals in the Egyptian calendar, and those are just the national ones. Every region, town, or temple might have its own additional events, which means the average person can't go a month without someone parading a statue down the street. Today, it might be a feast for Hathor, the goddess of music and motherhood. Or perhaps Bastet, the feline goddess who loves dancing and libations. Or it could be one of the many ceremonies for Osiris, where the theme is death, resurrection, and lots of shouting. You're not sure. You don't get a program. You just know someone handed you a lotus flower and told you to look pleased. Interesting fact. The Opet festival in Thebes lasted nearly 3 weeks and involved carrying the god Ammon's statue from Karnak Temple to Luxor Temple, along with grand processions, banquets, music, and beer. The priests and royalty saw it as a deeply symbolic religious moment. You, a local labourer, probably just hoped it didn't get in the way of dinner. You emerge into the street and everything is different. The usual grumpy silence of the morning has been replaced by drums, clapping, and the shuffle of sandals on packed earth. Bright banners hang from doorways, and the priests are already marching. Gold collars gleaming, incense thick in the air. Your neighbour hands you a palm frond and a vague smile. No one told you what to do with the frond. You hold it anyway. A statue of the god, swaddled in linens and shimmering cloth, bobs slowly on the shoulders of a dozen men. The crowd murmurs reverently, or nervously, or with that special tone of voice that says, "We're honouring this god, and also very much hoping the baker hasn't run out of dates." The procession moves like syrup down the street, slow, sticky, and impossible to avoid. Children dart between legs. Old women toss herbs. Cats scatter. You clap. You chant. You sweat through your one decent tunic. Your sandals, already frayed, decide today is the day they quit. The straps snap halfway through a particularly passionate song about divine rebirth, and now you're limping after a statue that doesn't notice. Despite the chaos, you know better than to stay home. In ancient Egypt, festivals are not optional. They are holy obligations. Everyone participates, or is expected to. Even labourers get the day off for it, though off is a generous word when you're marching, clapping, and dodging ceremonial crocodile masks. Interesting fact. During the beautiful festival of the valley, people visited tombs of relatives, picnicked in cemeteries, and decorated the dead with flowers, turning mourning into something oddly festive. Picture it, a family reunion with ghosts and flatbread. Eventually the priests stop. Incense clouds settle, prayers are shouted, offerings are placed. You contribute a few dates and half a clove of garlic, not fancy but sincere. A goat is led forward. You look away. The dancers arrive, temple-trained women with sistrums, rattling instruments, bright eyes, and more energy than anyone should have in this heat. They perform graceful, intricate routines meant to please the gods and mesmerize the crowd. You try not to blink too much. You definitely try not to get stepped on. The crowd erupts in polite shouting. Everyone claps. Or tries to. You've been holding this palm frond so long it feels fused to your hand. Eventually someone announces that food and beer are available. Now we're talking. You follow the crowd to the communal area, a shaded spot near the river or a cleared plaza where clay jugs are being opened and flatbread is being handed out like spiritual party favors. It's not extravagant, but it's something. You take a cup of beer, thick, warm, possibly fermented with yesterday's mistakes, and a handful of lentils. You find a shady spot near a column and exhale for the first time since dawn. Interesting fact. Beer and bread were the main staples distributed during temple festivals. Sometimes the surplus offerings, originally given to the gods, were redistributed to the public, especially to workers and their families. Divine leftovers, in a sense. Around you, people are laughing now. The music has slowed. The children are sticky and tired. Someone is definitely asleep in a pile of pottery. A priest is reciting something important, but he's been talking for 20 minutes and no one is listening anymore. You lie back, gaze up at the sky, and let the heat press you into the earth. This is your day off. And somehow it feels just as exhausting as every other day. Eventually, the music stops. The last prayers are said. The statues are returned to their temples. The dancers disappear. The goats reappear. And the crowd slowly shuffles back to normal. You walk home barefoot. The broken sandal is now tied with a spare reed. Your feet hurt. Your arms hurt. Your ears are still ringing. But the gods have been honored. The community has celebrated. And the festival has left its mark. In flower petals, spilled beer, and the lingering smell of burnt frankincense. You return to your little mud brick home, collapse onto your mat, and close your eyes just long enough to hear one of the kids say, "There's another one next week." You pretend you didn't hear that. At the corner of your little clay home, where the wall curves unevenly and the smoke gathers in winter, you keep a tiny shelf. Not for cups, not for bread, but for gods. Just two little clay figures, barely a few inches tall. One shaped like a woman with a lion's head, the other looks suspiciously like a frog. They're worn, chipped, and smell faintly of old incense. But they matter. This is your shrine. Not a grand temple, just a patch of belief in your cluttered home. Every morning, before bread, before work, you light a little bit of resin, or drop a pinch of dried herbs onto a hot coal. You whisper a few words, you nod just in case they're listening, and you carry on. In ancient Egypt, religion wasn't something that happened once a week, or only in big stone temples. It happened everywhere, especially in the corners. Your life is full of gods, not just one or two, but dozens, hundreds, depending on who you ask. Some families worship Ra, the sun god, and begin each day facing east. Others make quiet offerings to Taweret, the protective hippo goddess who guards childbirth. Bastet keeps away mice and evil spirits. Bess watches over the kitchen, short, bearded, funny-looking, but fierce. Your home might have a carved image of him near the cooking fire. He's your guardian against bad food and worse luck. Faith is not separate from the dust, the noise, or the lentils. It lives with you, just as you live with sand in your hair and the constant hum of flies. When you go to the fields, you whisper to the Nile, asking for gentle floods. When you bathe, you offer a thought to Sobek, the crocodile god, hoping his relatives are elsewhere today. When a child sneezes, you thank a god. When your roof doesn't collapse, you nod at another. It's less about devotion, more about negotiation, because the gods, well, they're not always kind. They're powerful, proud, unpredictable. You don't just pray to them. You bribe them. You flatter them. You beg them not to notice you too much. Interesting fact, ancient Egyptians didn't distinguish clearly between good and bad gods. Even malevolent deities like Set, god of chaos, had temples, festivals, and followers. The goal was not to avoid certain gods, but to keep them on your side, or at least out of your business. In the towns, the temples rise like mountains, stone columns, painted ceilings, and long rows of carved hieroglyphs. The priests march through in white linen, carefully shaved, carefully silent. You're not allowed in most of it. Regular people don't get to walk past the second courtyard. Only the high priests go into the Holy of Holies, where the statue of the god sits clothed and fed every day. Yes, fed. Gods are treated like royalty. Every day priests wash their statues, offer them food, perfume them, and leave fresh garments. Not because they're wooden or gold figures, but because those figures are inhabited by something divine. No one questions it. Even if the temple smells like smoke and old onions. Even if the taxes go toward funding more gold leaf for a god you've never met. Even if your cousin swears the priest took his best goat and called it an offering, you don't blaspheme, not out loud. The temple is the city's heartbeat. It hires workers, distributes grain, owns fields, stores records, holds festivals, hosts oracles. It also demands taxes, and tribute, and your time. Interesting fact, temples in ancient Egypt were major landowners and centers of administration. Some owned up to 15% of Egypt's arable land. They weren't just spiritual places, they were bureaucratic powerhouses. So when you grumble about temple tithes, you do it quietly. In your home, faith is humbler. the little figures by the door, the palm leaf amulet hanging near your sleeping mat, the scarab seal you press into clay when sealing a basket of grain. Your child wears a string of protective beads. Your grandmother hums spells while chopping onions. Your friend refuses to walk past a particular sycamore tree after sunset, says it's sacred, or haunted, or both. It's woven into everything, like the rushes in your sandals. You don't go a day without faith, not because you're holy, but because you're human, and this world is hard. The gods might be distant, moody, and occasionally terrifying, but they're also all you have between you and the randomness of flood, famine, or a scorpion in your tunic. And then there are the dreams. Dreams matter here, not in a wish fulfillment way, in a divine message kind of way. If you dream of crocodiles, someone's lying to you. If you dream of boats, a journey is ahead. If you dream of your teeth falling out, well, it's best not to mention that one. Temples even have dream beds, stone platforms where people sleep overnight, hoping for a god to appear in their dreams with healing or answers. You once tried it. The stone was cold. The gods were silent, or you fell asleep before they said anything useful. You tell yourself it worked anyway. And then there are the cats. Cats are not pets here. They're sacred, beloved, respected. A cat enters your home. It stays. It's considered lucky. It might be Bastet visiting, or a good omen for your household. Killing a cat, even accidentally, could result in execution. Interesting fact. In one famous account, a Roman visitor in Egypt accidentally killed a cat and was immediately lynched by a mob, despite official Roman protests. Egyptian love for cats was not casual. You feed your cat before yourself, and when it curls up by the cooking fire, you feel protected or watched. Maybe both. All of this, the gods, the rituals, the taxes, the incense, it's your life. You don't question whether the gods are real. They're in the river, the bread, the storm. When something goes wrong, you assume you've offended one. When something goes right, you say thank you twice, just in case. You once asked a traveling trader if the gods were the same in other lands. He laughed, said his gods didn't have bird heads. You thought that was a shame. As you sit by the door in the quiet evening, watching the moon rise over your dusty street, you light another bit of incense. You press your fingers gently to the forehead of your little lion-headed statue. Just a touch, just a thank you. Or maybe a reminder. You don't need a giant temple. You've got your gods, right here, in the corner. They don't always answer. But then again, neither do your neighbors. And now, let's visit the ones who do serve in those big temples. The priests and workers whose days are even more filled with ritual, routine, and respectful fear. Not everyone in ancient Egypt hauled stone blocks under the scorching sun. Some people, it turns out, were lucky enough, or unlucky, depending on your tolerance for incense, to work inside the walls of a temple complex. Less sunburn, more silence. Fewer blisters, more rules. The temple complex is its own little city, walled, organized, and filled with people who rarely shout, but still judge you with their eyes. Priests walk with purpose. Scribes shuffle with tablets. Bakers wake up before the sun. Brewers smell like barley and sweat. Even the cats seem holier here. If you work here, you're still not rich. But at least you're not dragging a statue arm across the desert on a log cart. Your day starts early, because the gods do not sleep in. You rise before the sun, bathe thoroughly, and shave every inch of your body. Yes, all of it. Hair is considered impure. Body odor is suspicious. You clean yourself like you're about to enter a dinner party with judgmental in-laws, who also control the Nile. Interesting fact. Temple priests shaved their heads and bodies daily to maintain ritual purity. Many even avoided certain foods, especially those considered impure or offensive to particular deities. Next, you put on your linen, white, crisp, and not particularly breathable. You say a prayer, pass through the outer gate, and enter the temple grounds, which smell like old incense, dry stone, and whatever the falcon god's offering room had in it last night. The outer courtyards are public. Sort of. People come with offerings, requests, bribes, and hopes. But as you move deeper, fewer people are allowed. High-ranking priests go further in. You, maybe a humble incense assistant, stay in the open areas, waving smoke around like a mosquito with a flair for drama. The hierarchy is steep. There are high priests, assistant priests, purification officials, record keepers, and possibly someone whose only job is to polish gold statues with a soft cloth and existential anxiety. Every part of temple life is scripted. Offerings are made exactly right. Incantations must be recited in the proper tone and order. You don't improvise with the gods. The statue of the god, hidden deep inside the sanctuary, is not just a statue. It's a divine presence. It's dressed each day, offered food, perfumed, and even lulled with music. It may be stone or wood, but you treat it like royalty. Or worse, like your sternest grandmother. You don't mess it up. Interesting fact. In some temples, priests would offer the god 3 meals a day, including meat, bread, beer, and fruit, and then remove the food, often eating it themselves later. Divine recycling. There's not much talking. The temple is solemn, quiet. Even the birds seem to chirp more respectfully. But beneath the silence, there's tension. You see, temple work is sacred and highly political. Everyone wants to be closer to the god, not just spiritually, but literally. The closer your job is to the inner sanctum, the more status you hold. And status means better food, better linen, better sleeping mats, and fewer people rolling their eyes at you. If you're a scribe, you're especially important. You track offerings, temple income, prayer schedules, grain flows, and who forgot to feed the ibis. You carry styluses and clay tablets. You mutter to yourself a lot. You also quietly compete with other scribes for promotions, favor, or maybe just a quieter desk away from the courtyard pigeons. Temples, after all, are massive economic centers. They own land, they lease it, they tax it. They store food, lend grain, fund construction projects, and organize labor. Working here means you're involved in the economic nervous system of the region. You're basically a bureaucrat, but one who occasionally bows to a statue of Horus. Interesting fact. The Temple of Karnak in Thebes had its own granaries, bakeries, breweries, livestock pens, and administrative offices. It wasn't just a temple, it was a self-sustaining city within a city. If you bake in the temple, your day is hot, flowery, and deeply repetitive. Bread for the gods, bread for the priests, bread for offerings, all shaped just right. You might work with molds to make bread in the shape of birds, eyes, or lotus flowers. It's creative, but also endless. If you brew beer, the temple version is thick, dark, and sometimes considered a semi-divine product. You try not to drink it on the job, unless you're a particularly brave priest with a loose definition of sacred boundaries. Despite the cleanliness rituals, the work is still work. You scrub, you sweat, you haul amphorae, you rearrange offerings, you sweep sand that just blows right back in. You stand silently in rituals that last longer than your patience. And when things go wrong, when the bread burns or someone mispronounces a hymn, it's not just a mistake. It's a possible cosmic offense, which is less than ideal. But temple life isn't all stress. Sometimes it's a place of refuge. People come here for healing. Some sleep in sacred halls, hoping for dream cures. Others donate statues in exchange for blessings. You see couples praying for children, widows offering food for their lost husbands, and farmers thanking the gods for floodwaters that didn't wipe out their entire year. You feel part of something bigger, not just the bureaucracy, but the belief. You also feel extremely tired. Your duties shift with the calendar. The temple observes festivals, fasts, special days, sacred alignments. You learn them all, or pretend to. There's always someone older than you correcting your pronunciation. And yet, it's not all bad. You're inside during sandstorms. You get fed regularly. You don't have to build pyramids or dig canals. Your hands might cramp from writing, but they're not bleeding from hauling blocks. You don't see the sun as much, but that's not always a bad thing, especially when it's over 40 degrees and you're dressed in white linen. At the end of the day, you return home, not too different from the field workers. Your bones ache in different ways. You say your own prayers, maybe shorter, maybe more sarcastic. You eat, you sleep, you wake to do it again. The temple looms in your dreams, not as a palace, but as a place of precision, power, and deep, echoing silence. And when someone in your family gets sick, or worse, you know where they'll turn first. Because in ancient Egypt, the line between medicine and magic is extremely thin. So now, let's shift toward those moments. When your body gives up, or your luck runs out. When the gods feel far, the medicine smells odd, and your neighbor insists the cure is in a beetle's wing and a crocodile whisper. Health was never a guarantee in ancient Egypt. In fact, if you made it past childhood without being taken out by a fever, infection, or something mysterious involving too much bad air, congratulations, you were already luckier than most. Sickness was a fact of life, and the remedies available were, well, they were remedies. Whether or not they actually worked is another question entirely. Egyptian medicine was a peculiar mix of the practical and the magical. On one hand, you might be prescribed crushed garlic, honey, or willow bark for a sore throat, and oddly, that might actually help. On the other hand, the same sore throat might also be treated by reciting a protective spell 7 times while spitting over your shoulder and rubbing crocodile dung on your chest. Not exactly FDA approved, but then again, there wasn't an FDA. There was just hope, superstition, and the priest-physicians who tried their best to keep you from dying too early. Doctors, or what we might now call healer priests, had access to papyrus scrolls filled with medical advice. Some of it was genuinely helpful. Others read like ancient stand-up routines, including cures for baldness that involved boiling porcupine hair, or instructions to apply mashed lizard to treat arthritis. And yet, for all the questionable techniques, the Egyptians were among the first to recognize things like the pulse, and they had a surprisingly complex understanding of the human body. At least, the parts they didn't attribute to angry spirits or misaligned deities. Of course, if the herbs and the prayers didn't work, and they often didn't, then came the final appointment: death. Egyptians didn't treat death as the end, but rather the next big chapter in a very long book. Ideally, you wanted your body to be prepared with care. You wanted it cleaned, anointed with oils, wrapped with precision, and maybe even accessorized with some nice amulets. Because nothing says eternal rest like a scarab necklace tucked into your linen folds. But not everyone could afford the deluxe package. Mummification was expensive, and like all things luxurious, it was mostly reserved for the wealthy. Pharaoh's nobles and priests got the full treatment. The rest? Well, the majority of people were buried in shallow graves in the desert, where the dry climate did most of the preservation work naturally. No bandages, no canopic jars, just sand, time, and the faint hope that the gods weren't too picky about wrapping techniques. When a person died, their family and community would often hold a funeral, no matter their social class. These ceremonies could be simple affairs with quiet mourning, or grand processions complete with professional wailers, musicians, and offerings for the deceased's journey into the afterlife. Whether you were buried with a pyramid or a palm mat, what mattered most was the ritual. Saying the right words, making the proper gestures, leaving the correct offerings. The line between life and death was thin, but highly bureaucratic. Forgetting an incantation could lead to a great deal of trouble in the Hall of Judgment, where your heart would be weighed against a feather. No pressure. Despite the solemnity of it all, there were also some darkly amusing details. For instance, embalmers sometimes left graffiti inside the tombs they worked on. Some bodies were accidentally mummified with tools still inside them. Scalpels, resin bowls, you name it. And, perhaps most unsettling of all, tomb robbing wasn't just something that happened centuries later. It was already a problem during the ancient period itself. People risked curses and capital punishment to sneak into tombs and swipe valuables, because even in death, someone else always wanted your stuff. Still, the process of death and burial reveals a lot about how Egyptians viewed the world. They believed in continuity. They believed that the body was a vessel worth protecting, even after life had left it. And they believed that a well-prepared corpse had a much better shot at navigating the afterlife. Whether that afterlife was filled with peace or monstrous crocodile-headed judges depended on your conduct and your ability to pay for the deluxe spiritual package. As we begin to leave the hush of funerals and the scent of incense, let us not forget those who made all this death so artfully arranged. For while some rested in tombs, others carved them, often for decades, in dangerous and dusty tunnels, far from the god's favor or the pharaoh's gaze. Next, we'll turn to the life of the tomb builders, skilled artisans who shaped eternity for others but rarely received monuments of their own. Let's descend now into the quiet workspaces of Deir el-Medina, where chipped stone tells stories that papyrus never did. Not everyone in ancient Egypt hauled bricks or baked bread for the gods. Some were artisans, men with calloused hands and good posture, at least until middle age, who spent their lives etching the walls of eternity. These weren't ordinary workers. These were the craftsmen of Deir el-Medina, a tucked-away village near the Valley of the Kings. It was a planned settlement, almost a gated community, where the residents all shared one thing in common: a full-time job building other people's afterlives. The tomb builders lived fairly well by Egyptian standards. They had houses made of stone with rooms, doors, and even, occasionally, privacy. They were paid in rations of food, beer, oil, and clothing, all doled out by the state. Think of it as a government job. Except the pension plan was non-existent, and your boss was sometimes a divine monarch who hadn't smiled since childhood. The village itself functioned as a tightly knit ecosystem. Scribes, stonecutters, plasterers, painters, even water carriers. Everyone had a role, and every role mattered. Carving a pharaoh's final resting place wasn't just a task, it was a sacred obligation, and also a massive logistical headache. The work was slow, exacting, and rarely glamorous. Crews would trudge daily into the hot, claustrophobic tomb sites, deep inside the Theban cliffs. They brought chisels, hammers, and enough patience to paint 1,000 tiny lotus petals without snapping. First came the excavation, the slow scraping and hauling of stone. Then the planning, rooms laid out with mathematical precision, sometimes aligned with astronomical features, sometimes just hoping the walls wouldn't collapse. After that, the real artistry began. Painters brought myths to life in vibrant mineral colors, while sculptors shaped the walls into sacred scenes and daily reminders of royal greatness. Everything had to be perfect, or at least close enough to avoid a curse. But perfection was a myth. Mistakes happened, names were misspelled, gods were drawn with the wrong number of arms. One particularly infamous tomb had to be resealed and redone entirely after the decorator added a scene out of order, sort of like assembling IKEA furniture with the instructions upside down. Sometimes builders left corrections scribbled on the walls in red ochre, ancient editorial notes scrawled by tired hands. Occasionally, they left less professional marks, doodles, complaints, passive-aggressive jabs about their supervisors. You could call it graffiti, or just job stress with a chisel. Deir el-Medina wasn't immune to the everyday frustrations of labor. Workers went on strike when their rations were delayed, which makes it possibly the site of the earliest recorded labor protest in history. They didn't ask for much, just their fair share of grain and a bit of respect for not dropping a ceiling on a pharaoh's face. Some of the complaints were immortalized in ostraca, broken bits of pottery used for casual writing. These shards captured notes like, "My eyes are sore from the dust," "I'm hungry," or "I didn't come to work because I had to fetch my tunic." The human voice, always finding a way to survive through millennia. For all the pressure, the workers of Deir el-Medina managed to produce some of the most breathtaking art of the ancient world. The tombs they left behind, especially the ones in the Valley of the Kings, are still standing, still vivid with color, still hauntingly detailed. They tell stories of gods and judgment, of kings crossing rivers of fire, of eternal gardens and skyboats, and they also tell stories of the men who painted them. You can see the brushstrokes, the corrections, the places where someone must have paused to scratch an itch or sigh deeply into the silence. Interestingly, despite spending their entire lives building tombs, most of these workers were buried far more modestly. Their own graves, discovered nearby, are small, personal, and full of charm. Some painted their own coffins. Some included tiny statues or models of themselves at work, still carving, still painting, even in the afterlife. The line between labor and legacy was blurred. You worked to honor the dead, but you also hoped, quietly, that someone would remember the hand behind the hieroglyph. And so, the tomb builders pass into the same desert wind that wore down the Sphinx's nose and softened the corners of the pyramids. They were the quiet artists of death, the unseen engineers of memory. And as we begin to step away from the tombs, we glance back at the footprints they left in the sand. Proof that even those without names carved deep into stone still shaped history with dusty hands and tired eyes. Next, we take a wider view. We'll look back on Egypt as a whole, not just as a place of golden masks and solemn gods, but as a land of hard lives, cracked heels, and enduring dreams. A kingdom built by calluses and ceremony, where even the divine rested on very human shoulders. So now we come to the end, not just of the video, but of a long, dusty walk beside the Nile. We've followed workers through stone quarries and temple kitchens. We've peeked into tombs painted with eternity, listened to the hum of prayers muttered through cracked lips, and watched children grow up surrounded by gods, sand, and stories. And now, after all of that, it's time to be honest with ourselves. You wouldn't have made it. No offense, of course, it's not personal, most of us wouldn't. The heat alone would probably knock you out before breakfast. The sun, unfiltered and constant, beating down on your shoulders while you lug a basket of stone chips up a hill for hours. The clothes would itch, the bugs would bite, the water would taste like someone rinsed their hands in it first, and the beer, oh the beer, was thick, warm, and full of floating bits. Refreshing in the way that a mud puddle is refreshing if you're desperate enough. Add to that the backbreaking work, the unyielding hierarchy, the ever-present risk of disease, crocodiles, or divine wrath. It was not, in short, a lifestyle that catered to modern comfort, and yet they did it, day after day, year after year, across centuries, dynasties, floods, and famines. They endured. They built pyramids so precise, they still baffle architects. They painted scenes so vivid, they remain brilliant 3,000 years later. They invented calendars, surgical instruments, ink, and makeup. They worshipped with discipline, ruled with style, and even made bureaucracy feel holy. They may not have had air conditioning, but they had legacy. And that, oddly enough, seems to last longer. The people of ancient Egypt weren't superhuman. They complained. They slacked off. They wrote excuses for missing work and gossiped about their neighbors. But they also rose before dawn, shaped the world around them with their bare hands, and left behind a culture so enduring that we're still talking about it while wrapped in blankets, drifting towards sleep. And that's what this is, really. A quiet remembering, a slow exhale. Not a celebration of kings and conquests, but of people, real people, who did their jobs, raised their families, and prayed to gods whose names we still whisper. They weren't always noble, they weren't always wise, but they were here, in the heat and the noise and the silence of the sand. And they kept going. So now, as you lie there with your eyes growing heavier, let it all fade into stillness. The chisel tapping on stone, the breeze across the Nile, the distant chant of a temple rite long since concluded. Let your thoughts wander, soft and slow like the river. Let the Nile drift past. Let the dust settle. And let the pyramids dream while you rest beneath their shadow.